Hello, Mr. Walker. Chapter 9 is all about bargaining. I've had some unique um, perspectives on bargaining as I have been, first of all, a chief negotiator for an education unit for an education association of a fairly large district, and at least a fairly large district in South Dakota. And then I became a board member and was on the other side as a part of the bargaining team as a board member, and that was the same district. And then as an administrator, I also assisted the superintendent in bargaining the last 7 or 8 years. So I had a lot of experiences and been on both sides of the issue. I will say just philosophically, I think the tension is healthy between bargaining units and admin and school districts. I think it's necessary. Um, I know that sometimes it may have been abused in places where unions are so strong that they protect those who may not perform well. But for the most part, I think the protections that are afforded of grouping in unions are really significantly important to teachers, certified staff, and other staff in having the ability to carry out their duties. So it's a very democratic process. Since Upton Sinclair in the jungle, I think that working conditions have improved dramatically. And I think a lot of that has to do with the ability to bargain for those sorts of working conditions. The process of communication and the decision making surrounding those requests are important to have those procedures defined. Labor relations acts, of course, have helped depending on the politics, and basically the economy has allowed um, at different times for unions to have more leverage. And then today, I think most people would probably admit that there is much less leverage. And the politics today by outside groups and those who are very powerful have taken a lot of that away, which is interesting, and it's funny how those things evolve. Um, Sometimes the benevolence of those who are in power and administrators has allowed unions to become strong, and then um, when that has been abused, then the pendulum swings back, and administrators and powerful people and politicians take away a lot of those rights if they can, uh, believing that just the work or the economic environment itself will take care of people. I think there always needs to be a good balance. I think you'd probably say the same. And again, I think there's a healthy tension, and in particular when you're dealing with people all day long and all that variability, having some protections in place are very important. Um, Teachers are usually covered by state regulations and very different from state to state. But the ability to bargain usually has these components that there's a recognition of the unit, and that's interesting to talk about that in a second. The scope or the allowable negotiations, the process itself, an impasse procedure, work stoppage if that's permitted, and then the master contract or the master agreement as it's described in the book. The unit itself, as membership is representative of whatever group, and you know, most of the time, from what I've been a part of, it's been a certified unit and then a classified unit. Here in Carroll, there is not a classified unit. There's just a certified unit, and then what they call a non-bargaining unit. I think that at the very least, my intent is to have those non-bargaining units be represented by different individuals, and at least they have a voice. It might not be a bargaining agreement particularly, but at least have a voice and can voice their concerns. Um, the scope itself. And by the way, I just it's it is quite a nuance and was not discussed much in the book, but of the bargaining units um, in education of members and non-members, and the non-members who benefit greatly from the members who sort of stick their neck out in going and negotiating. Um, I had a good friend when I was the chief negotiator for the teachers union who just simply didn't want to be a part because did not agree with the principles of NEA. And I understood, but my thoughts always are that collective bargaining, especially in a union that's 3 or 4 million strong, gives you certain advantages. And we live in this country and don't agree with everything, but we don't leave the country. So I understand, and I understand principal people may not join for different reasons. But I don't agree with everything in my church also, but I still go to church every every Sunday. So anyway, I wonder about that, and I do think the union is much stronger, especially um, now in a place like Iowa where they've been undercut pretty much by the state legislature. That a strong union and a strong voice and them showing up together and really having representation at least makes the administration think that they are unified in their requests. And I think it's helpful. But anyway, that's just my thoughts. The scope, salary, fringe benefits, and working conditions. Um, and that's difficult because sometimes admin policy seems to tread on those a little bit, especially working conditions. So it's hard to know sometimes what negotiated items are, and I guess I'll have a lot of discretion that way to decide what the working conditions are. Um, the book describes just a team that was, HR, administrator, business office, maybe a principal, maybe a board member, and did not describe the team of teachers. And so, did not really get to that till later. What they described in the book seemed to be that the team itself was just somebody who'd come up with a proposal and then just give it to the employees. I'm absolutely for a collaborative bargaining idea, which since the 60s, I think that's been practiced. So my idea of teams would be just what was described before: a superintendent, business office manager, in our case, a principal, and a board member, and then the team for the Carroll Education Association, whoever they would select as representative, to come and meet with us. Um, First of all, you get a strategy, set some ground rules, and then negotiate, and then make recommendations to the board. If there's impasse, there's is mediation and there's fact finding. I know um, the one thing that's not doesn't helpful for teachers is that's generally not binding. I guess I don't know the law completely here, but I'm assuming that's the same. That even if you do mediation and fact finding, it's really no binding agreement on the board. They can just take the recommendation. And since there will not be arbitration anymore, is what I understand. Um, since there won't be, then there's no further place for the education association to go. So trying to maintain a positive relationship and just being real transparent, which they refer to in the technological portion of the chapter, is important. And everything's public, and all that transparency, especially with technology, should be able to be accessed by the negotiating team for the teachers and really understand school finance, and so they understand what the possibilities are. Um, Also, strikes, which at least in the state I came from, were illegal even to say in school, and the recent strikes in Oklahoma, in Arizona, have reaped benefits, and so you wonder if you need to have a policy in place for your school, and we may just discuss it as we review policy, just in case there is a strike in our school. Master contract um, is terrific, and I'll be, of course, reviewing that even more closely for my project that I'll turn into you. But many times there's still a lot of administrator discretion in master contracts. And again, I think that's okay. And the difficulty is that if you're not really going to live up to those policies and procedures, then there's going to be a lack of trust and a lack of faith in the master contract. Violations of the contract always have grievance procedures, and I've already noted those and looked through those, and they seem rational and easy to follow. And then finally, as I mentioned already, the technology and how great that is today that all the information can be accessed. So very easy to provide support and provide data for decision making, which hasn't always been the case. I know when I negotiated and computers had not yet made their presence known, uh, I had to go dig up facts and put them together myself and bring lots of copies of things to try to support our rationale for other requests that we had. And in actuality, the business office probably could have hidden almost anything they wanted to, and there was always some fear that that was going on. Although the business manager and myself are actually really good friends in the place I negotiated, but I can see how that could happen. Just to let you know too, I have maintained my union membership in NEA even as an administrator. I thought that was important. And for some the liability, but for other things, just as a symbol of my affirmation that I think it's healthy to have bargaining processes and bargaining units that really do discuss things, and so there's a better culture and a better morale, knowing that it's thoughtful in what you do and it's not just us against them. Thanks again, Mr. Welker. It was a good chapter, and all my experiences came back to life as I was reading. So thanks. I'll send this on to you soon.